Hello, my name is Ralph Whyte. I'm an editor at Répertoire International de Littérature Musicale, and I also teach at Columbia University. And I am delighted to be here to introduce our next panel, which has two papers. And the first of those will be given by Federico Favali, who's going to be talking to us about the concept of hidden theatricality in the string quartets by Kaija Saariaho. Please join me in welcoming Federico.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'm a musicologist and a composer, and for so many years I've been investigating the dynamics of theater, not only on the stage, not only in the operas, but also in instrumental music. In my opinion, I can be criticized, of course, but in my opinion, the root of all music is a theatrical one, and that's why I've been developing this project, which is massive, which is complex, to study the theatricality in instrumental music, particularly in the string quartets by Kaija Saariaho. And I'm honored to show you what I'm going to discover, to research in the next weeks, because I want to produce something new, a new key to read these works. It's not the only one. I don't know if the best one, but definitely is a new key, and that's what what allowed me to keep going with my research. We know very well that Kaija Saariaho was deeply involved with theater. No, in fact, she has written several operas and stage works, and in these 2 days we had the occasion to focus our attention on some of them in particular. Her most recent works include L'amour de loin, as we know very well, an opera in 4 acts. Then Adriana Mater, yesterday we talked about it. And then La Passion de Simone. Emily, this morning we had this talk on this opera. Only the Sound Remains and Innocence. And of course, we should also include, as regards stage works, 2 early works, Ma and Study for Life. So I think this can prove his works, his love for theater, and how much she did in this field throughout her life, no? Throughout the extension of her composing life. Of course, during the years, characteristics of this opera have changed, and I think I can say also her way to see the theater and to deal with theatrical dynamics have changed. If we could find a link, I would say that her opera is characterized by amazing orchestral colors that accompany the scene. So she herself underlined the importance of this aspect in several interviews and during the talks, especially on Innocence, we had the opportunity to realize how it happened. We also know that she gave great importance to the structure, to the form of the work, no? And if I'm correct, she planned the form of the work, and she had the map, so to speak, of the work always in front of her while composing. This can be a proof of the fact that she was deeply involved in the form as a construction. We know very well the architects builds forms in the space. Composer builds form in time, no? As time passing by, no? But this form has to stand. And this is one of the challenges that we have in front of us. Sorry for this. Okay, so all the work she did for musical theater is well unknown, and we talked a lot about it. Now I focus my attention on the string quartets. She wrote 2 string quartets, both premiered by Kronos Quartet, the first one in '87 in San Diego, and the Terra Memoria in 2007 in Tokyo. Now, for my talk, I will focus my attention on the second one, and I will talk mainly about it, not because what I'm going to say is not linkable to the first one, but just for time reason. But again, we should talk also about the first one, the quartet with electronics. When we talk about the theatricality of music, we are talking about a generic subject, a big group that contains an enormous quantity of elements. Traces of theatricality, or if you prefer, of a non-representative theater, can also be seen in the sonata form, for example. No? We have a first theme and a second theme with different character. They fight in the development, and then they make a piece in the recap. No, I think this can be seen as well as a form of theatricality. There is basically a tension. There is basically a tension among 2 areas, 2 themes, 2 characters, call them however you want, and something happened. In this case, this tension is solved. Now, following this view, I can define the concept of a theatrical dynamic, even in instrumental music. I firmly believe that even in instrumental music, there are dynamics referring to the theater, to the world of operas, and these dynamics have been developed without words, just using instruments, without seeing any character on the stage. We could discuss now, but it took at least until tomorrow morning. Okay, what about before tonality, for example? Did it happen as well in the madrigale or not? Well, it's a very complicated topic. I will leave it for the moment, but of course I'm open if some of you want to talk and discuss about it. It's also true so that this form as the sonata form of non-representative theatricality can also be seen, for example, in the aria da concerto for voice and piano or voice and instruments. Here a singer talks about his feeling, about effect and so on, about what happened to him or to her, about this premonition on an imaginary stage. If one wanted to give a definition of musical theater, one could say that musical theater is a form of performance in which words, music, singing, dance, and scenography merge to tell a story on the stage. Now, I know it's a very generical definition because the concept to tell a story is very generic, and maybe it's not the best way to define it, the best word to use it in this field. But I think all of you have understood what I meant. It can manifest itself in form such as opera, or musical, or works for the stage. It is a form of theater that rejects the traditional idea of mimetic representation of reality. That is the concept that theater should represent character, events, and situation in a believable and narrative way. Instead of imitating the external world or telling story through characters and actions, non-representational theater focuses on stage presence, language, materiality of the body and the voice, performative action as and then itself a sensory of conceptual experience rather than a narrative one. So I think this is very important, and I want to spend just 30 seconds to underline it. The point is we are not in presence of an opera with character on the stage, so we are not in presence of a narrative representation. There is not a story to tell, but it's a conceptual experience. There are two characters, audible, maybe not visible, that are interacting among them, and there are tensions among them, and something happened among them. Even there is not a story we can tell with words, but we could recognize this dynamic. And this is the seed of my work. So of course, many composers have worked in this sense and have developed these concepts. But I focused on Saariaho string quartets because I think that in this case, it's particularly evident. Theatrical dynamics are particularly evident. So, for example, let's take Terra Memoria. The string quartet opens with a certain color. I'm more than characters. I would say colors. I would say colors. I would say interactions of colors. Some years ago, while I was studying in Bologna, I was talking with a professor of mine, and he asked me a question that opened me our entire world. We can see colors, but can we hear colors? Can we hear the interactions of colors, not only see colors? This professor was pretty famous because it was Lorenzo Bianconi, and maybe all of you knows. I'm still trying to answer to this question after 20 years. Maybe because, I don't know, maybe I'm not so clever, I must admit. But I think it's a question of a life, and can address an entire research. Now, in this piece, I think this aspect is particularly clear, and a question I would have to ask if maybe to Jean-Baptiste or other, if Kaija started from a theatrical view to write her pieces, even the instrumental ones. I think it could be a very seminal question. Now, I was saying that in this piece, this piece opens with this color, this particular color given by the instrumentation, of course, and then the situation changes. As you can see, the texture changes as from number 3 on. As you can see, I hope it's clear enough. It's big enough. But I have the score with me, so if some of you want to check on the score, please come to me after the session. And then the texture changes a lot during the piece, 70 minutes piece. The texture changes a lot, but cyclically, this color recur. Even varied, but perfectly recognizable as a type of instrumentation. I think from one side, so here you can, sorry. Yes, from 3. Okay. Wrong slide, sorry. You have to trust me, and sorry. the colors recur again and again several times during the piece. So from one side, we are satisfied a very important topic of Western music, the concept of internal coherence. From another side, we can see a sort of character, which is a color in our case, that returns several times, and it's not the same because a lot of time has passed, and this lot of time has passed as something that's happened before in the slot before, So in this sense, I think it's possible to draw a sort of theatricality, a sort of movement on our imaginary scene. I'm still researching a lot on this topic, as I said at the beginning. Particularly, I'm in touch with a professor in a university of South America in order to define the concept of space in mind. No, the music develops in a space, but it's not a physical space. It's a space in our head, in our mind. How can we define the musical space in our mind? How can we define the movements of the music in our mind? Because in this case, for what I'm saying, our mind is our stage. So you have color changing and moving and interacting on this stage, on this imaginary stage. That is my perception, that is my mind. So it's a very, very important aspect. But until now, you could also criticize me saying, okay, but it's a very intellectual view. I don't want to say who cares, but, but how can we deal with it? No, I mean, what does it add to our knowledge? Well, actually, it's true. It's a very intellectual view, and we know very well that musical is also something very practical. So my point was, how can I represent all these this stuff visually? How can I make a visual theater starting from a non-visual theater? Well, before talking about it, let's listen a couple of minutes to the first part of the quartet in order to hear the changing of this color. Of course, there is no time to listen to all the work, so we won't say every passage, but I invite you to listen to the work in another moment. Different colors, different characters interacting. So it's theater. I'm not saying opera, I'm saying theater. Yes, I think Quartet has to. I know it's painful, but I should do it. Sorry, I'm terrible. Forgive me. So, as I said, now the point is, how can I represent all of these concepts? There are many ways to represent chords, even in atonal music, and music theorists, of course, have read so many books on it, and are aware of many studies, no, on the visual representations, maybe with geometric figures of chords and so on. I found a way. I think it's pretty clear, and I choose it because I wanted something that allowed me to represent figures in a three-dimensional way, because having figure in a three-dimensional way link them to characters, no, in a common sense. So my starting point has been to take a cylinder with at the base the all 12 degree of the chromatic scales, and then the octaves of the piano as a circles one above the other. No, so for example, if I have C on the sixth octave, I can put a point on the corresponding point of C on the sixth circle. Sorry, octave circle. If I have A on the third circle, I can put a point on the precise position, no, that I need. Then unifying them in a three-dimensional way, I can create my visual representation of the chord. So now here I have an example to show you of what I'm doing. Of course, you have to understand that it's a massive job and carry on. I want to represent the chords of the piece in this way. For example, I took two chords here, just for example, just to show you how to represent them. A chords are 170, 67, and 170, and I represent them in this way. So signing the points on the circles and unify them. Of course, it's a terrible representation. I'm sorry for it, honestly, because I couldn't find a way to represent them in a three-dimensional way, but I promise you they'll find a way. And these are the representation of two chords. Now, studying the figures, I think that studying the figures is possible to study some characteristics of the chords. For example, if one angle is bigger or smaller, it gives me that it's more consonant or dissonant, and so on. So what is my goal of all this study is to represent all the chords of the piece in this way, and make a video and put this video while the piece is going by. So in this way, it will be possible to see how these figures that now I can call characters change and interact among them as the piece is going by. So in this way, it will be possible to make visible an inner theater, which is not invented by the analyst or by the musicologist, but it's in the piece. It's a dynamic that is in the piece. But my goal was to make this dynamic visible. And I think this operation can be, as I told at the very beginning, another way to deal with the score, to deal with the piece, to analyze the piece itself, and maybe can be a way to offer a reading of the piece, and through this way reach a larger number of people, not that with a visual representation can listen to the piece, can follow better to the piece. So this is what I'm doing. I'm looking forward to hear to your comments and critiques to my work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Federico. Do we have any immediate questions? Yeah.
So I've done a lot of research on synesthesia, and people do obviously see colors and hear colors and so on. I'm curious as to why you didn't use colors in your diagrams.
Oh, that's a very good question. Because the risk, I think that I could use them. I think that the risk is to make a very arbitrary thing. I mean, a very arbitrary approach. For me, this chord is green. No, for you is violet. And all of them are right. But representing as a, I mean, in this way, it's a more scientific way to represent them. And yes, for my purpose, that is to show the inner theatricality, so the changes of the chords and on the internal dynamic of the piece. I think they can work.
And one other question while I have the microphone. Do you think that Sarajevo's quartets are more theatrical than, I mean, I think all string quartets are theatrical. What makes hers more theatrical than Mozart or Haydn or Beethoven or Elliott Carter?
Yeah, I knew him. I talked to him. Well, Elliott Carter is very difficult, to be honest, but I will try. As I said at the beginning, this is my idea. It can be criticized, but I think that all music is theatrical. So in the case of Mozart and Haydn, for example, in the example of the sonata form, as I said at the beginning, no, there is an inner theatricality in the dynamic of the sonata form itself. In the case of Saariaho, I think I found this work astonishing. I feel I started this research, to be honest, if I can make a confession, because listening to these pieces, I was moved, I was crying. I felt this theatricality just listening to them. There is a recurring texture, varied, and this is a recurring character, no, recurring on the stage, on this imaginary stage. I think for these pieces, the stage of these pieces are ourselves. And in this way, Saariaho puts ourselves on the stage because we become the stage. And so this music is inside us. And so this form of theater is inside us. And I think here it's very evident in such a type of, not only in the string quartets, but I chose the string quartets because, as you know, the string quartets has been the place where composer try to challenge his or her ability in counterpoint, in dealing with the form, and so on, not many things. And I think this is a clear example of this inner theater, and I found them absolutely fascinating. In the case of Carter, well, we could discuss, but I need time, maybe next time.
Hi, thank you so much for this. It's a fascinating perspective on instrumental music that is quite novel to me. And this may be slightly tangential because I think you've made a very great case for the type of theater that you are outlining when we're listening. But I also think, as coming from a performing and I think a lot about theatrical rhetoric, visual rhetoric of theater, do you feel a difference or can you speak to differences that you perceive in terms of this viewpoint and framework, listening without a visual of the performers versus watching a live performance where the performers are in front of you and in real time in the space with you? Or maybe there's a third sort of dimension to that, watching the recording versus watching the live performers.
Oh, you are talking about the difference.
Yeah, for you.
To be honest, I don't have a definitive answer to this question, because my point is I want to share a question. When we go to theater to see a repertoire opera like Don Giovanni, Tosca, and so on, no? We see characters on the stage. We see characters, but what we perceive, what we get, the movements of the characters or interactions of dynamics on the stage. So following this view, I think there is not a big difference, because here we hear and we feel dynamics, moving dynamics. So we feel this not representative theater, not visible theater. No, in the other case, we see characters on the stage, but we feel we feel dynamics anyway, you know. And for example, in the operas, we took into consideration yesterday and today, we talked about type of writing for a technical perspective, no, which is wonderful, no. But I think that they're perfectly fine if we see them in order to create a certain theatrical situation, and then another situation will follow, and then another one, and then another one, and we perceived it. No? In fact, we said, I think this morning, that in the case of Innocence, for example, what we see on the stage is this lack of justice, and so on. No, don't remember the words exactly, but so I think more than what we see, even for the operas of Kaija, but also for the repertoire operas, more important that what we see, of course, is very important, but it's also important what we see behind, what we perceive, what we hear, no? The dynamics that comes into our mind, no? In this sense, I could also say that, yes, these works, these quartets are innovative for so many aspects, but also they are very linked to the tradition. No, I think this is the miracle of every work of art. No, that is new and linked to the tradition at the same time. I think it's magic of a composer. I'm not sure if any composer can explain why and how, but simply she or he feel it. And that's why I said that, you know, this view of inner theater, a theater in which the stage is our brain, ourself. We can find this view in many composers. I think in this case is particularly evident. And I can also add that it's a very contemporary way to read the theatrical dynamics, and contemporary ways to deal with new techniques that we can use on the instruments today. But to say something, no? I think to talk to people, we do not need a story. We need theatrical dynamics, and I think this music, all this music, even instrumental music of Saariaho, is simply wonderful for this aspect. It shocks you in a very positive way, no? And what we need from a work of art, no? Because a work of art doesn't shock us.
Thank you for this fascinating perspective. I just want to shortly or briefly ask that what I got is that you're kind of making a connection between theatricality and the emotions of the music, or the moving and touching aspect of the music. And is this what you imply and what you mean, or how are those connected? Because
No. This is part of what I meant. In other words, the fact to deal with theatricality and theatrical dynamics involve us in a certain situation, and we are part of that situation. No? And as I said before, being the stage, in this case, of course, we are part of the situation, and we live the situation in a very particular way. And I found wonderful the fact that this way, of course, is different from me and you and him and so on. No, this work is for everyone, but we have different sides.
Yeah, I'm just curious, why do you need the word theatricality for this aspect of music that is moving each of us? Why? Like, I understand that it can be there, but is it necessary?
I understood it because there are several dynamics interacting among them as on a stage. So the concept of theater, even from the ancient Greek theater, is characters interacting on a stage, no? And in that case, developing a story. In this case, no, but you know, the dynamics, no? For me, everything is theater in a very positive way, no?
Yeah. Thank you.
I don't want to be a philosopher. I'm not a philosopher.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. Yeah, I have a comment or a question more. You said about the concept of space in mind.
Yeah.
Partly related, I had a piece called Imaginary Spaces. But maybe I was feeling a bit from what you say that don't you leave a little bit behind the body, because the body and mind, they cannot really be separated. And I think also in Kaija's music, as someone said before, there is this sensorial aspect also that comes very much to the fore, also through the instrumental writing and so on. So maybe it's not only an intellectual dimension. As you said, I also relate to that, of course, this aspect of performativity, I believe it is also there through the instrumental music and partly yeah, that's true. Another question that came to mind is, did you come across a metaphor string quartet, Finnish string quartet, and they perform standing and they use their bodies in a very performative way?
Thank you. Thank you for your note. Yes, I agree on the first one. I mean, the fact that body and mind are not separated. Every maybe I didn't underline it, highlight it very well before, but of course, every experience, even mental one, is an experience of our body, no? And the concept of a space. Saying the concept of space, I mean the concept that the experience of the space that we can do with our brain, but making with our brain, we call it also physical space, no? So even our body is involved. I'm researching on this aspect, and this is just a brief note. For example, in Infea, the fact to use the electronics, new sounds create new space. So in this way, there is a research even in this sense. Now, not only from a technical point of view, but also, yeah, it's a much larger point of view. No, how can we perceive these sounds? How can we perceive these new sounds? Which type of space can create these new sounds? I think it's fascinating. As regard the second question. Which was the second question? Sorry. Yes, the physical aspect in yeah, this is another aspects that deserve to be investigated. Following a researcher at Columbia that published some years ago an article, a very interesting article on how people react listening to music, and the fact that a way to react is the first step of analysis of the piece. I'm trying to develop also this aspect, but this is another story. How the movements of the performers can be considered a sort of analysis of the piece, because according to the movements you can understand in which part of the piece we are, which type of sounds are created, and so maybe a type of sound can characterize one section, another type, another, and so on. So this is a point that deserves to be developed in the future.
Well, maybe I could ask one question as well, which is about, so here you concentrate then on Terra Memoria, the later string quartet Terra Memoria, rather than Nymphea. And Nymphea has electronics in it.
Yeah.
And so I wonder, because that's a noisier piece than Terra Memoria, because of the presence of electronics, to what extent it would complicate your use of this pitch-based model?
Yes, yes, if we take such a type of representation, but maybe some software in computer can help us to make a graphic representation of that course of sound aggregates and yes, and so on.
Are there any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, Federico.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we'll just get set up for the next speaker.
I shouldn't close the. She's done. I didn't touch it. Thank you.
Our second speaker in this panel is You-Kyung Cho, who's from Tokyo University of the Arts, and she will be speaking to us about memory as reconstruction, temporal entanglement, and musical mediums in the operas of Zimmermann, Saariaho, and Pagh-Paan.
Thanks, Ralph. I'm so honored to be here today for this conference. Collaborate with the New York premiere of Innocence, and huge thanks to the organizers and for inviting me to present my work today. And most important, thank you to everyone in the audience for your time and attention. Okay. Okay, my presentation is not limited solely to the work of Kaija Saariaho. Rather, I seek to situate her output within the broader relationship between temporality and memory in post-1945 opera. Firstly, this presentation opens with an inquiry into how memory functions in music, the auditory art form. Okay, and one of the great achievements in the previous memory and trauma studies is to have revealed that language has its limitations when it comes to representing negative memory, such as the Holocaust or war trauma, and memories and forgetting, which cannot be expressed through written media, can be brought back to life through artistic endeavors. And this served as an opening to broaden the discourse on post-memory. Post-memory is not a memory through direct experience, but a memory formed through imagination and a deep emotional connection with the memories of others. Meanwhile, recent memory studies have often prioritized the representability of negative memory to invoke a certain past event and mostly concluded by, mostly conducted by visual art area. It means musical memory has been largely overlooked. One possible reason for this tendency is presumably because representability is always an arguable topic in the field of music. Therefore, in a musical context, it would be very meaningful to examine how memory is evoked and why it remains a fundamental necessity of the art form. In other words, it would be worth to clarify the relationship between memory and aesthetic experience to know how and why memory works in music. To further this investigation, I must limit my research scope to the auditory dimension in isolation, purely musical and sonic dimension. And since opera is considered as Gesamtkunstwerk, total work of art, at least two sensory modalities, that is visual and auditory, exist together. Some recent multisensory studies in the brain science field have widely reported that the brain does not give equal weight to simultaneous multisensory signals. Instead, it must strategically allocate limited cognitive resources to modalities with higher processing priority. This sensory dominance theory denies the conventional idea that vision is superior in all situations, showing that information from one sensory modality is preferentially processed and eventually dominates our behavior and awareness. This argument demonstrated that other senses exerted a stronger influence. I'm sorry. I should. Okay, sorry. This argument demonstrated that other senses exert a stronger influence depending on the context and type of memory. This supports that in our perception and awareness, auditory modality in opera could play a more crucial role than the visual one. Indeed, the auditory modality inherently helps us reconstruct time and memory in a particular way. Specifically concentrating on this auditory element, today's discussion explores how contemporary composers navigate temporal dimensions in opera, centered on memory and trauma, and examines the resulting aesthetic impact on the listener's experience. In the following, I'm going to talk about how negative memory that accompanies trauma can be conveyed through musical medium of sound by examining the contact point of temporality in the operatic works of Zimmermann, Kaija Saariaho, and Pagh-Paan. And through this comparison, we will be able to posit Saariaho's work in the perspective of post-memory. My discussion targets more at poetics and aesthetics rather than simply focusing on a composer's life or a piece analysis. Okay, before getting into the topic, I will give you some context for why I chose these two composers. And they are kind of the same generation and have similar career background in terms that they have mobile or multicultural background. And then they probably knew each other because they studied at the private University of Music with Klaus Huber at about the same time. And they employ an intercultural method, leading them to develop skills for manipulating temporal aspects. Then how is the relationship between time and memory structured in the operatic works of Saariaho and Pagh-Paan? Regarding the traversal of time and memory as it emerges in the two composers' poetics, I argue that there are two distinct layers of temporal manipulation. Firstly, individual memories within the opera, let's call this layer one. And secondly, the inheritance of collective memory outside the work. Let's call this layer two. Speaking of layer one, while both works were composed in the same year, the true commonality between Saariaho's Innocence and Pagh-Paan's Heaven on the Road lies in their structural treatment of time as a vehicle for memory. The whole structure of Innocence is based on two timelines, you know already. A wedding celebrated in Helsinki in the early 21st century and in the world of memory of school shooting 10 years prior, And Heaven on the Rose centers on Catholic persecution in Korean history, centering on a mission trip of a protagonist. In both works, time traverses between the past and the present. Their manipulation of time triggers a non-linear narrative, which is a storytelling technique where events are portrayed out of chronological order, breaking the traditional narrative arc, the 5-stage structure of a story: exposition, rising action, climax, and falling actions, and resolution. This non-linear narrative structure results in external type of memory with which the audience is encouraged to engage, eventually involving in inheritance of memory. For a better understanding of layer 2 in Saariaho and Pagh-Paan's opera, I would like to briefly refer to Zimmermann's philosophy of time. Their manipulation, time, language, and social messaging echoes Zimmermann's Die Soldaten, a work built upon the concept of spherical structured time, the rejection of linear progression. And Bernthalus Zimmermann, a generation senior to Saariaho, is one of the important figures who deeply pondered the temporality in music. In his time theory, Zimmermann rejected the linear chronological time in favor of spherical structured time, termed by himself, where past, present, and future is interchangeable. Starting with Saint Augustine's notion of the perpetual present, where the human soul encompasses past and future through memory and anticipation, Zimmermann gained ontological insights from Husserl and Heidegger's time theory, temporalization. Temporalization means, in short, focusing on experiential time, linking time to human existence. To put it plainly, stimulated by the past memory and future anticipation, we are encouraged to contemplate our authentic selves, reconstructing the present. For Zimmermann, the temporalization operates as a mechanism for fostering the critical thinking of the listener themselves. Based on this philosophy of time, he adopted literary technique into musical expressive technique, aiming to facilitate critical thinking in the listener. Zimmermann was influenced by Lenz's destruction of the classical units of time and space, allowing various events to overlap freely in a work. He also drew on James Joyce's notion of a stream of conscious. In Ulysses, he often quotes the simultaneous dance of hour, and Pound's imagism to visualize a subconscious world that transcends spatial, temporal constraints. His opera Die Soldaten is based on this consideration of time in which characters move back and forth 10 different places and time. This nonlinear structure portrays typical situations of human absurdity and social status that are relevant to any era. I call trans-historical or universal, urging the audience to think critically about the present society. By recontextualizing historical styles and narratives, as he reiterates, his philosophy of time, quote, constitute a critique of universal human problems related to race, class, and oppression and freedom, end quote. We can link a relationship between Zimmermann's temporal theory and Saariaho and Pagh-Paan's time manipulation, albeit to some difference in their compositional styles, of course. And characters in their opera travels different time and place quite freely. As previously stated, this time travel can disrupt causal links, bringing about weakening a central character's role and putting a focus on peripheral characters forward. And this is a big difference from the character's conventional role. In traditional opera, the protagonist is the central element serving as a drama's focal point, exploding with emotion through arias and maximizing musical prowess to engage with the audience. However, in the operas discussed in this presentation, the significance of peripheral characters increases. Like the case of Marie, the main character in Die Soldaten, while the waitress Teresa in Innocence and the venerable father Thomas Young of Choi in Heaven on the Road are placed in the core of the story respectively. Characters around them, I call it the periphery characters, play a pivot role in communicating within characters on stage and with audience off stage. Let me show one example among many others. That is insertion of an episode of religious figure, a military chaplain in Die Soldaten, a priest in Innocence, and a commentator in Heaven on the Road. These characters appear in the middle of opera, directly or indirectly asking critical questions to the audience. And this real-time communication by the peripheral characters is one most important feature in Saariaho and Pagh-Paan's work. Now, they are delivering social messaging envisioned by the composers. In Act 1, Scene 4, and Act 3, Scene 1 of Die Soldaten, a military chaplain, Eisenhardt, and soldiers talk about women's fate in war, raising the subject on prostitute. This scene is abruptly inserted, irrelevant to the previous and subsequent scenes. And in Saariaho's Innocence, in Act 3, Scene 12, when the priest confesses to the audience about his contradictory feelings toward the school shooter, making us to consider the problem of the true meaning of innocence and guilt. In Heaven on the Road by Pagh-Paan, there is a commentator on stage with the same costume as the dancers, which are ghosts. She informs about not only the historical background of the Catholic persecution, but also characters' stories and memories. She also appears as a time traveler and a chronicler who conveys the events unfolding 200 years ago to us in the present. These peripheral characters stop the time in a work and communicating with the audience. These scenes functions as a non-diegesis, which exists outside the story and helps with empathy by communicating with the audience off stage. Empathy, sorry. Maybe I was ahead, I'm sorry. Empathy is an important concept for inheritance of memory, post-memory. As mentioned earlier, post-memory refers to memories formed through deep emotional bonds with the memories of others and through imagination. The pain or trauma of the past is recreated as something of the present. Post-memory goes beyond simply sharing grief to raise an ethics of memory regarding how to remember the suffering of others and connect it to social justice. Saariaho and Pagh-Paan are overtly conscious of this concept. Empathy is realized through language experiment for them. Witnessed in Zimmermann's literary reception, in literature, language experiment involves breaking traditional linguistic and structural rules to explore new forms of expression, often using techniques like fragmentation. All three composers employ the fragmentation of sound of languages, both music and words. Their using multi-language is not merely symbolization of cultural diversity. Putting the meaning of each language used in their operas aside, characters not only sing in different languages, but deliver specific mood of languages like Sprachgesang or folk style is included. This language experiment stimulates the auditory sense used as resistance to the conscious forgetting and unconscious concealment of the past. Due to the time constraints in the following, I will mainly focus on the case of Saariaho's Innocence, in which 9 languages are used. In this work, the characters are all allotted different ranges and styles of languages. And for example, Teresa's daughter, Marketa, who is a victim of the school shooting incident, sings in the Sami-inspired folk style. Well, we had a wonderful presentation yesterday and this morning by 2 presenters about this, so I skipped this part. And other pupils are speaking in different styles and mood. According to a music and opera critic Guy Demon's interpretation, Iris, student 3, speaks in the phlegmatic French, Alexia, student 6, in the manic German, and Anton, student 4, in the manic Greek, and Anton, student 4, in the melancholic German, but carefully said with the speech tone and accent and mood. In the 2019 interview, Saariaho mentioned that she wanted to create a complex and multilingual opera with strong story representative of our world. She added, she always wanted to work on a subject matter not only personally, but also more universally. For Saariaho, as she stated, the aim of employing multi-language is evidently to create a broader range of empathy. Pagh-Paan has also been experimenting languages in a diverse way to express an individual's, sometimes collective's voice. Voice here is resistance, emphasizing the creation of empathy. For her, music is, quote, existential comfort for a person weeping in pain, and they regain courage and find the strength of life through music. Here, the conclusion. This presentation revealed that transcendence of time within a musical work plays a crucial role in the transmission of memory by exploring the philosophical and aesthetic significance of temporality in music. The traces or scars of the 20th century, a period in which the entire world suffered from the memories and trauma of the Second World War, were addressed directly as collective memory in numerous artistic works following the end of the war. Examples of this can be also found in music as well, particularly in the philosophy of time evident in Zimmermann's opera. A generation later, composers born after 1945, like Saariaho and Pagh-Paan, focus more on individual memory or trauma in their work, inducing empathy and emotional identification with others, thereby expanding this into social and collective memory in the 21st century context. This is possible because personal experience can be viewed as universal. And this approach could serve as an important framework for analyzing social trauma that must be remembered across generations. Thank you for your listening.
Thanks very much, You-Kyung. So do we have questions? Yep.
Hi, thank you so much. Very interesting. I am personally really interested about the fragmentation of the song text and the kind of impact that it has on the totality of the vocal music. So I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on that. Like, does it have to do, in your perspective, with the empathy, and how does it? Are they really linked?
Okay. Well, where should I start from? It's kind of a long story. About the fragmentation, right? Actually, I've been working on the collage, like musical collage, and that was my doctoral thesis about it. And then I found out the collage itself, it's not just like a compositional technique or some kind of technique. It's kind of all behind this. We have all the social, cultural, historical context in it. And then about the fragmentation, it has a long history, right? Like early 20th century, and then to now it's still continuing. And then now in music, there is now I'm teaching in class like sampling music is also part of it. I guess it's kind of has been developing for like a century. So I cannot really tell everything here, but let's say. But what I found is like before let's say 1920s and 30s with the surrealism, the fragmentation was rather abstract. But after war, 1945, and they became more, has more meaning in it. And then nowadays it's more like I don't know the answer here, but we kind of expand more, more culturally maybe. So in this process, what I realized was fragmentation is not really just like paste and cut and use it. It's like it obviously related to our psychology or history, culture, everything. I guess. I hope this answers enough for you.
Yeah, thank you so much. We can continue later.
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah,
Sure.
thank you. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you for the talk. Very interesting. The question of empathy, I think that's interesting in Innocence, because it feels like the empathy that we feel to characters is at a dynamic progression throughout the piece. We start out maybe empathizing with certain characters. We discover the students were bullying and not as nice, so that empathy starts to diminish. And then toward the end, obviously, the bridegroom, we find out what happened to him, and all that empathy probably vanished there. So it's there's not one sort of stable empathy that we have. Or the question is there a character in Innocence where the empathy does not change for the audience, and that there is no change in our perception of that character? Because most of them, we're discovering more about what went on, and everybody is not innocent. There's some kind of complicity to that, and that's the whole point, is that it's hard to be empathetic to any of those characters once by the end of the story. Did you see one character at all that was maybe did not change our empathetic response to?
I think I quite get your question. Could you rephrase maybe a little bit easier for me? Because of my English, I guess. What was it? Sorry.
Yeah, so just was there one actor or character in Innocence where we felt empathy from the beginning to the end of the play, and we did not lose empathy for them?
Okay. Well, did you say sympathy or empathy? Empathy. Right, sure. Okay, sorry. Yes, well, I'm sorry, I still didn't get your question. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I think the character that I felt perhaps might be that person would be the waitress.
Yeah.
Who was hiding this understanding that she was dealing with, that knowledge of this family had been complicit in her daughter's death. And so we had empathy for her, knowing what she knew at that time. And maybe that doesn't change. Maybe that's the only character who we felt empathetic from beginning to end of the story. That may be one character.
Well, that I can make some comment on it, I guess. My thought in my okay, actually, while I was listening the talk yesterday and today, I was kind of wondering that people talk about the shooting mostly, but not the bullying much. But let's say in our cultural context, we don't have a gun, I guess, in our country. So bullying is a more serious problem. And then, so for me, empathy to the, let's say, you said to the waitress doesn't change while in the opera, but other characters, let's say, who was it? Yeah, the maqueta maybe is possible that we might change. Maybe some people change in the middle of watching, I guess. But I wasn't sure about that too personally, because we don't know. We cannot really decide who is guilty, who is innocent for in this opera. So it's sort of it's hard to decide, So I think that is the point that maybe Saariaho aimed. I don't know. So we should think about that. I think thinking critically is more important in this process, I guess. So maybe for some people, well, we cannot judge really who is guilty, who is innocent for Marketa's case, I guess. So it's kind of difficult, I guess. Sorry. All right.
Do we have other questions? Maybe I could ask a question about musical style.
Yeah.
And in terms of how does this work on temporality interact with the different musical styles or these different composers are using? In particular, I was thinking that Zimmermann is a 12-tone composer, right? It's primarily, or Die Soldaten, I think, is a 12-tone work. And so how does that interact with the interpretation, and how does that perhaps influence his philosophy of time? And does that perhaps, how would you connect the philosophies of time of Saariaho and Pagh-Paan, who are not writing in this 12-tone idiom?
Okay, I have answer for that. Zimmermann is really 12-tone technique composer. I thought about it actually. In my study, at the very beginning of his career, yes, he was into it, but later he kind of turned his back away from the 12-tone technique. And he used the 12-tone as a quartet form. Let's say in one of his last piece, Ich wandert mich. That was like he used Nono's 12-tone technique from Nono's. He kind of borrowed 12-tone technique from Nono's piece. So it's kind of quoted, borrowed one. So he doesn't use really 12-tone technique. He didn't create. He just used as a quotation, musical quotation. So for Zimmermann's case, when his musical style is more like a musical quotation or collage, I guess. And Pagh-Paan's case, this is also very controversial for Asian composers, I guess. Let's say Korean traditional folk tune like Sprake-Zang, she used as well, but scholars see her as a Korean composer, but actually I'm not sure about that too, because she uses, she's more like avant-garde or more, she mostly works in Europe, so not sure about that too. So so she kind of hybrid those two different cultures. In Saariaho's case, I have found that she is her most of her piece is like a spectral music. So that's some scholar kind of related this spectral technique in with temporality, but that's just within the work like a structural story, and what I do is a little different one. So so I think I cannot really say that temporality, what I'm in my term here, is really related to the musical style or not. That's I'm not really sure about that.
So when you're talking about temporality, you mean more in a sort of dramaturgical sense or something like that, would you say?
Yeah, that's part of it, yeah.
Yeah. And then also, just because you quoted Zimmermann earlier, where it was fairly strong stuff about rejecting the concept of progress by having this non-narrative or non-dramatic form of music theatre. And so do you think the same political commitment pervades the works of Saariaho and Pagh-Paan, or do you interpret it differently?
I think it works differently, I guess, because my study is kind of sort of generational study as well. So I have been working on Zimmermann, Henze, or Ligeti as the same generation, and then now I'm moving to the next generation, which is about 40 years or 30 years apart from them. I see the difference between these two generations. That's because of I think the time, I guess, the probably the history of what they have experienced, because the Zimmermann's generation experienced directly the Second World War, and then they were in the war, and that they were serving in military as well, and then the Pagh-Paan and Saariaho is they were born after 1945, so they use this probably their philosophy or their mind or their thoughts or compositional or aesthetic is very different from the previous generations. I want to see those connection as well. So, well, I don't know if I answered correctly, but that's what I can say right now.
Yeah, and it's also noticeable that you were talking about the connection between Zimmermann and Nono as well, because also like another very political composer, right?
Yeah, true.
Are there any other questions? Okay, so thank you, You-Kyung.
Thank you so much.